It has been raining, and this is the first time back on the job site after the rain has stopped. I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. We're putting in a container barn here, and we're doing it in phases, and this is our level plateau. It's not level yet, it's getting there, but I'm going to share with you some important conditions about job site. First off, it was raining like anything, quite wet, and we need to make sure the site was prepared. So every day you leave the site, you want to make sure it's ready to go so that if you do get a rain event, you don't have any problems. Now this site was ready to go, and you can see while there's water in the bucket, and I need to clean that window off, but while there's water in the bucket, anywhere that there was water settling is minimal, and then it's soaked into the ground. So you want to wait 2 full days, sometimes 72 hours after a rain event before you get back out here with equipment, because the last thing we want is this thing all gummed up with mud and stuck somewhere. The next thing is every time you leave this job site, you want to make sure it is as level as possible, and that if there's any runoff, it's controlled, because again, when you do a project like this, you want to make sure there's no runoff in the woods. So you can see there's a couple little puddles, but where I'm walking, I'm not leaving footprints because the ground is dry enough, so we have okay drainage. Another factor is, see all this topsoil mounded around the outside? That topsoil is our silt fence. So on some job sites, you're gonna have to actually put up a silt fence in order to keep the water from running off the site. In a case of an ag project, well, in case of any project, you can use brush as a silt fence. But what we've done here is we've gotten this all packed down. Now I see some glossy spots here and there, but the tracks are still visible. See a lot of deer prints, which is always exciting. Now there are areas that are soft, like right where I'm standing right now is a little bit soft. So this area right here, I'm going to be mindful of its softness. Oh, I'm going to have to walk through it anyway though. Look at a turtle. There's a box turtle over here. This box turtle is sunning right there. Now a lot of folks will say, hey, you know what? Don't do this kind of stuff. Don't build out terraces. Don't do earthworks because you're disturbing habitat. Well, I promise you, we're going to put back as much habitat and maybe even more. But we need to have a small disturbance in order to have large projects work. So rather than clearing all the woods here or this entire area here, we've got this one little corner. Again, the whole project's on a grid. So we can put the barn up here, and then later we can clear the woods across here with goats. And then, you know, there's habitat still around. Again, look, there's a moist spot here. But we got to do this project the right way, because if all this soil runs off and saturates and then gets down into the woods, then we've messed up environmental space outside of our work area. So our work area is surrounded by a brush dam. You can see it all along the bottom there. All along the side here, the turtle's sunning on it, all up there. And then our main work area is somewhat leveled. And my job today is really get these sticks out of the way. But all this work area is pretty much level and set up in a way that it will take the pressure of the excavator now, and the skid steer. Now here's another thing too. I've noticed there's 4-wheel tracks out here. So it has been stable enough that the neighbor could ride his 4-wheeler through. And notice he's real respectful about it. He's not donutting out here or anything, but he's able to drive through here, and I'm looking at the treads. I see a well-formed tread, but I don't see a lot of skidding. I don't see a lot of slickness. Now we get down this way, we even have the treading left over from the skid steer, and then a little bit of a wet spot here. So there was some water that settled here. But the majority of our site is nice and clean and firm. Now, it has only been 48 hours since the last rain event. It is dry enough to do some things, but not dry enough to be running equipment over, because water doesn't compress. What'll happen is when the equipment is driving over this, it's gonna create mud, and it's also going to push out the bottom of this whole work. And that again is why we have built in the compaction of the terrace here. And you can see that below the terrace is still undisturbed. And we've raised up the area to get our overall terrace. Now we're going to be really careful here today because we don't want to get equipment stuck. And we also, knowing that water doesn't compact, we don't want to be trying to pack this down too much. We're simply going to survey. We may pull some soil off the top in there. We may grade out some of the outside areas here. And then we'll carefully compress this lower bund. I'm also looking to see if there's any water running. So you can see right here, there's a little bit of water running because we had a pretty big rain. Of course, it's stopped with our silt fence or our brush dam. And I want to find out where that's coming from. And it looks like it kind of poured off the top here. So there might have been a spot here that held water for a little bit. But it also might have came off of a larger watershed. So we're looking for problems. If there was a problem, for example, we may come back through here with the excavator and lift up some of the soil to just pack down this bund a little bit more. And I'm going further down here. I see a lot of big rocks that are washed off, but essentially I don't see much water that has come down over the bund itself. Here's a little saturation point. Okay, here we go. There we have water that accumulated and channeled down the bund. So that's something we've got to look at. So this tells me this area here needs to be raised up. And then there's a spot over there that needs to be raised up. And then we need to, just like our earthwork terraces that we grow on, make sure that we have a nice bund on this end. So that's going to be kind of a rib at the bottom of the terrace to move the water over the outsides of the terrace rather than allowing it to come over and channel like this. And then again, you can see, because we had undisturbed area down here, that even though it pushed the water around a little bit, it didn't go, the sand and silt didn't go anywhere. We don't have any silt beyond our brush here. Now, if there wasn't a brush dam or topsoil materials to do this, then we need to get silt fence and put that up. And now every job site's different. In this case, we just happen to be chipping all the biomass on the property. If it was a case where we took those chips and sold them off, then, or they were higher quality chip and they were sold off, then we'd have a different fence. But again, I'm just walking over the site. I'm observing how the patterns that we talked about in previous videos, how the ground is reacting to my weight. See, I'm able to make a footprint here. How the silt is running off. You can see the gradient difference between that soil there, this really fine soil, and that soil. So there's a little bit of water that ran through here. Water moves the soil. And then I can see what might be a channel right here as well. And so that tells me we need to bring this end up and we need to put a bund, but the bund is going to be like an L shape. So the bund is going to go up there and around here. Now, do we want the bund to come all the way from the top all the way to the bottom? No, we want to stop it down here somewhere so that the water can channel through the topsoil, can kind of filter into the topsoil. So we may even dig a sump up there. So any water that settles on this terrace actually goes into the sump and then drains through the woods that way. And I actually have pipes and stuff that we can use if that's necessary. Or we could just let it soak through the wood chips and the biomass that's there. I'm also going to look a little bit beyond the area here into the woods to make sure we don't have any soil washing through. And by the way, there's these huge piles of rocks back here. There will be a natural building course either on this site or one of the other sites that the Sustainable Homestead Institute manages. And then there's definitely a lot of rock material to really do a great foundation. But I'm looking behind here, and I'll walk behind here without a camera just to make sure that everything looks pretty solid, because we don't want any grass, water, soil washing into our wood area. See, we want to have the pristine woods as much as possible, and then our disturbance is targeted and we use appropriate equipment. Even if we use bigger excavators or bulldozers, we would still have an appropriate setup, keeping water from running off of the surface, keeping water from moving outside of our workspace, and then ultimately containing our activities to just this small area. Again, I know you've seen people, they would bulldoze a whole acre, they'd have a giant pile of brush that they would burn. We don't do it that way because every tree is a valuable resource. There's calories in those trees in the middle there. And yes, it would be easier if we cleared off the whole site. However, it wouldn't be effective in the long term of getting the results that we're looking for. I'm Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. This has just been a little bit about pattern recognition and about checking a job site over after a rain event. Remember, give it 2 days, maybe 3 days to make sure it dries out. Do a quick survey and do excellent work. Thanks for watching. You can ask your questions at www.prosperityhomestead.org.